Not a Word by Rambling Writer. Read by My Name is R. Chapter 3, Ticking Clock. As the doorknob rattled, Locke dropped to the floor and rolled under the bed before she knew what she was doing. At 2 feet from frame to floor, there was just enough space for her. There were skirts around the bottom, but they were thin and didn't reach the floor. Any pony who looked under the bed would see her immediately. She was shaking and breathing loudly, not helped by the dust in the tight space. Locke clamped her mouth shut with a hoof, but that just made her breathe loudly through her nose. "Breathe slow, breathe deep," she told herself. "Breathe slow, breathe deep." She forced herself to take a long, deliberate breath through her nose. Quiet. Good. Breathe slow, breathe deep. Breathe slow. Click. The door slid open. Breathe slow, breathe deep, breathe slow, breathe deep. Some pony walked into the room. From the sleek, shiny feathering trailing their fetlocks, Locke guessed that they were a bat pony. The texture of the fur didn't quite look like that of one of the more common tribes. She strained her ears, but couldn't hear any angry muttering. The pony opened the wardrobe. Against her will, Locke's breathing sped up. Metal clinked as the pony slid hangers around. It didn't look like she was reaching to the second row back, though. After a moment, the pony tossed something on the bed, and it shook the frame just enough to release a little dust from the bottom. The motes drifted lazily and settled on Locke's fur, on her muzzle, in her nostrils, in her eyes. Her breathing caught as a few specks of dust raced up her sinuses, and she started blinking like mad in an attempt to clear her eyes. More movement. The dust was further stirred up from the wind as a pile of cloth fell to the floor. Was the pony changing clothes? Why? If dinner was done, maybe they were changing uniforms. If dinner was done, how long was it before the sacrifice was due to happen? Locke's mind raced. Dinner wasn't quite done, right? The owners of the house would spend some time chatting about whatever inane things rich ponies chatted about. This servant was just up here before dinner was done in order to prepare. Couldn't get the sacrifice's blood on their nice uniform, right? Locke prayed to whoever was listening that it was. More dust settled on her nose. The pony reached down and grabbed the clothes on the floor. Locke managed to pick out a bat pony's fangs. More rustling in the wardrobe. Then the bat pony shut the doors. A single one of Locke's nerves loosened. The bat pony hadn't noticed the missing gate key. Without further ado, the bat pony left the room. Although she listened closely, Locke didn't pick out the telltale rattle of a key being turned. Locke breathed in, and dust tickled her nose. She couldn't help it. She pulled her hooves from her mouth and coughed, which meant she inhaled more dust. Hacking, she crawled out from under the bed and shakily got to her feet. She didn't even try to stop it, and instead just hoped the bat pony wouldn't hear it. When the door didn't open, Locke assumed it was safe to cough her lungs out. She didn't have much time. Dinner was almost over, and ponies would be moving around the house soon. But she had the key. She just needed to get back to the library and get the unicorn out. Almost there. Locke slowly opened the door and cautiously looked right. Nothing. She looked left. The bat pony was several dozen yards away, heading down the hall at a slow, easy pace, and, from the casual swishing of her tail, didn't seem the least bit suspicious or tense. Locke ran over what she could remember of the floor plan in her head. She probably couldn't reach the staircase before the bat pony, not in these unfamiliar corridors, but maybe she could climb down the dumbwaiter shaft, at least to the 3rd floor. It all depended on whether the top was open and what floor it was on. Okay, a plan, at least. Holding her breath, Locke crept into the hall and inched the door shut behind her. It didn't squeak, and the click it made as it closed was almost inaudible. Locke released her breath in relief. As she did so, a bit of dust tickled her nose. Before she could hold it back, Locke sneezed. Locke and the Bat Pony both froze. Locke broke off first, running in the opposite direction down the hall, painfully aware of the sounds her hooves were making on the floor. She wasn't sure whether the second set was her own echoes or the Bat Pony following her. She scampered around a corner before she heard any response from the Bat Pony. The hall was unfamiliar. The Bat Pony would find her in seconds in the house. It was familiar territory to her. In the house. Where was the light well? To her left. Locke scrambled that way. Yes! The window of the light well was just ahead of her. Locke bolted, opened the window, and climbed out onto the ledge. She closed the window as best she could. Unfortunately, that was still a few inches open, and dropped off the ledge, hooking her hooves onto it. There weren't any ways out of that garden, and nowhere to hide down there. Earth Pony's strength was focused in the legs, not hooves, and Locke's fetlocks began to throb. She bit her lip to keep her focus. She listened. The clip-clop of the Bat Pony's hooves emanated from the open window, slowly getting louder. They stopped. A second later, the dull whoomp as the window was closed. Locke didn't move, although her hooves started burning. She kept listening, but with the window closed, it was pointless. Was it safe? Had the Bat Pony left? Had she noticed Locke climbing out the window in the first place? After about 10 seconds, Locke wiggled a rear hoof into a crack and did a chin-up. The Bat Pony was walking away from the window, less than 10 feet from it. Locke quickly dropped out of sight again. So quickly her hooves slipped on the ledge. She fell. Her reflexes scrabbled at the wall, whooshing past. She couldn't get a grip on the third-story ledge. Her hoof bounced off and hit her painfully on the muzzle. She barely managed to latch on the second-story ledge. Her front legs felt like they were going to get ripped from their sockets. Her rear hooves dangled in space. Then she braced herself against the wall and hoisted herself up. Her hoof slipped a little. One large stone popped out of its place. It fell. The grass did nothing to muffle its impact, and the light well channeled the noise like a trumpet. Locke froze, praying no pony would notice. She focused all her attention on listening, and high above her, she heard a window being opened. Awkwardly standing on her rear hooves, Locke jammed herself into the frame, trying to stay out of sight from above. She held her breath, but her heart was pounding so loudly it had to be audible throughout the house. It was definitely drowning out any noise the Bat Pony was making. Hours ticked by, but Locke knew they were only seconds. Her lungs felt ready to burst from holding her breath. She knew the Bat Pony couldn't hear her, but what if? She glanced under her leg through the window. No pony. Still struggling to keep herself in the frame, Locke delicately worked her tools out, jimmied the window open, and slid back inside. She was found out, even if the Bat Pony didn't know where she was. The Bat Pony had heard her and followed her, and knew some pony was in the house. Locke had maybe a minute, 2 if she was lucky, before the Bat Pony alerted her masters of an intruder. Then it was only a matter of time before they went to the ritual chamber, found the unicorn missing, searched, and actually found her. Then all of Locke's work would be for nothing. And she didn't even know where she was in relation to the library, so she had to find that before the family did. Why was she here again? Because you're a decent pony who couldn't let another die. Son of a... Okay. Looking at the front door, the library was on the left side of the house, right? Locke thought about that for a bit. Yeah, that was right. She'd gone halfway around the house at the top before she'd found the key. When she was running from the Bat Pony, she'd turned a corner and the light well was on her left. So she was on the right, the correct side of the house. Finally, a stroke of luck. All she had to do was head outward. Hopefully. Locke tiptoed outward. Although she kept her ears up and swiveling, she couldn't hear anything out of the ordinary. Not yet, anyway. Not even any pony coming up or down a staircase. She sighed in relief when she reached a long hallway, pulled open a door, and saw a window. She glanced left, and... wasn't that one of the busts she'd seen first coming out of the ritual chamber? Yeah, it had that same austere look about it. Locke picked up her pace a little as she approached it. Yes, she'd definitely seen this statue before. She recognized that corner. Although, that she took care to look before she leaped. Quickly, she went left, then right, straight a little, and hallelujah! The door she opened on her right was to the empty library. Well, not quite empty. The unicorn was there, up at the window she'd come in from, and seemed to be telekinetically tossing stuff from a bag out of it. Locke climbed up the shelves, half noisily, so she wouldn't spook the unicorn, and approached her. The unicorn grunted, and a skull hurtled out the window. "Hey," said the unicorn, sounding much improved. "Hey." Locke pointed at the bag. "What's that?" "It's, The unicorn shifted her weight guiltily. "You were gone for a while, and I figured the ponies here need all this stuff in that room for whatever. So if they don't have it, they can't use it, even if they'd come back and rebound me again. So I've, been pitching it over the fence through the window." She grinned nervously. Her horn glowed, and a fragment of pyrite soared to the other side of the street. Locke blinked, then grinned. "Good thinking." She nudged the unicorn aside, and leaned out the window. It'd be an easy drop for her, but... "I'm assuming you're not up to jumping out?" There weren't even any second-story windows in the library. A pity. What?" The unicorn chuckled nervously. "No, I'm not jumping 2 stories down. Don't you have a rope?" She looked hopefully at Locke's bag. "No." One of the unicorn's ears went down and she tilted her head. "What kind of a thief doesn't have a rope?" "The kind that doesn't expect to rescue ponies." The unicorn snapped her mouth shut and nodded jerkily. "That was cruel." Locke brushed the thought aside. "Listen, I know the way out from here. Kind of. And we need to move fast, because I think dinner's done and ponies are moving through the house again." The unicorn's pupils shrank, and she nodded. "Follow me." Locke jumped down to the floor of the library. The unicorn climbed down a ladder, a bit shakily, but not slowly. Locke poked her muzzle out through the door. Left, no pony. Right, no pony. If she remembered correctly, right around the corner, right again, and there ought to be a staircase down to the entry hall at the end of the next corridor. She gestured to the unicorn, and together they tiptoed down the hall. But right before they turned the corner, Locke heard hoofsteps. "Back up, back up, back up!" whispered Locke, backpedaling and shoving the unicorn as quietly as she could. The unicorn closed her mouth and stumbled back. The hoofsteps got closer. Behind her, Locke heard a door open. "In here!" whispered the unicorn. Locke didn't look twice and scrambled in after the unicorn, shutting the door as quickly as she could. She breathed a sigh of relief. She turned to survey the room. A glitzy sitting room with overstuffed chairs and couches. 2 stories, the top floor nothing more than a balcony going all the way around the room. A spiral staircase connected the upper and lower levels about halfway across the room. Locke and the unicorn were on the 2nd story. And standing right in front of them, a feather duster in her mouth, was a shocked Pegasus caught mid-cleaning. Locke and the unicorn stared at the Pegasus. The Pegasus stared at Locke and the unicorn. Then the duster fell to the floor and she shrieked, "Some ponies freed the sacrifice! She's out! Locke reacted instinctively, blindly lashing out with a hoof. It smashed into the Pegasus's muzzle. She took several steps back and blinked twice. Her eyes rolled back into her head, and she collapsed. Doing her best to keep her heart under control, Locke hissed at the unicorn, "Come on, we've got to go before..." Unfamiliar voices echoed throughout the house. "Did you hear that? The sacrifice is escaping! North sitting room, now!" "Come on!" Locke easily vaulted over the railing to the ground floor. She turned to see the unicorn scrambling down the staircase. The second the unicorn was down, Locke took off across the room for another door. Was it her imagination, or could she hear hooves coming at them from outside? Locke ran through the door and into a hallway, heard a yell, and kept running into the door on the opposite wall. A long dining room, big and flamboyant, with one of those needlessly huge tables. Locke didn't spare a second to look at it, but spied a door on the other side of the room. She made for it like a missile. The sound of a door slamming and some pained gasps told her the unicorn was still following her. No screams, so she wasn't hurt. Probably. "Where are we going?" gasped the unicorn in confusion. "I don't know. That way?" yelled Locke, and kept running. She was about halfway across the room when she heard the door behind her shatter. She glanced over her shoulder. A big earth pony, a big one, half again her size, was bearing down on them. The fear gave Locke wings, and she redoubled her speed towards the door. Luckily, it opened inward. Locke and the unicorn crashed through into a kitchen. The unicorn stumbled and fell into one of the island counters. Locke slammed the door shut and cast her eyes over the kitchen, looking for something to block it. There, right next to the door, a big, magically powered icebox, or fridge, or whatever it was called. She could move it. Locke threw all her weight onto it. No, she couldn't move it. Another slam. Nothing. The thing was heavy. "Hey, help me with this," Locke grunted at the unicorn, who was still getting to her feet. The unicorn blinked in incomprehension. I don't... What? But then she got it. An aura surrounded the icebox, and it suddenly became about a ton lighter. Locke easily slid it in front of the door. Not a second too soon, something slammed onto the other side of the door. The icebox rattled, but it didn't fall. A snarl. Wham! 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 No effect. Locke hung her head, gasping for air as blood screamed through her veins. "Okay," she gasped. "I think I know where we are. The entry hall's not far, so if we can..." "They're in the kitchen!" some pony yelled on the other side of the blocked door. "Get to the exit hall, now!" "Move!" Locke bellowed at the unicorn. She ran for the other door. She'd laid her hoof on the handle when she heard loud hoofsteps on the floor outside. Her mind went into overdrive. She took in the situation in a few instants. Handle, long, thin, turned. Hinges, outside, door opened outward. Not good. She whirled around, looking for knife block on the counter. She snatched up a knife in her teeth and plunged it into the wood below the handle, pushing it deeper with a hoof. The end was blunted, but that wasn't going to stop an earth pony hopped up on adrenaline. Locke grabbed another knife. This one was better, much sharper and pointier. Outside, the hoofsteps reached the door. The handle began turning, but it bumped into the knife. "What?" some pony said. As the handle jiggled again, Locke drove her new knife into the door above the handle. It couldn't turn in either direction now. Muffled curses as the handle kept rattling and the knives kept stopping it. Whoomp! Another hit on the other side of the icebox. It might have been Locke's imagination, but she thought she saw it move an inch. Locke spun in place, looking desperately for a way out. The unicorn was still standing near the icebox, looking wide, small-pupiled eyes at nothing and hyperventilating. "Oh, Celestia! Oh, Celestia! Oh, Celestia!" No help from her. Something kept digging at Locke's subconscious, telling her she was missing something. Something important. The dumbwaiter. Wasn't that supposed to be in here? Bang! 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 "You open up this door," some pony shrieked from the other side of the knife door, "or when we're through with you, you'll beg for death!" Deep breath in, deep breath out. Her heart was still racing, but Locke slowed down enough to eye the kitchen more closely. Then she spotted it, the dumbwaiter door. Down to the cellar, and out through the exit she'd seen earlier. Easy. Which meant it wasn't going to go that way, but it'd buy them a few minutes. Locke bypassed the niceties of lockpicking and simply destroyed the lock with a solid kick. Luckily, the door was thin and weak. The unicorn was still in shock. "Oh, Celestia! Oh, Celestia! Oh, hey!" Locke smacked her across the chin, a bit harder than she intended, but the unicorn focused on her. "We're going down the dumbwaiter shaft," she whispered. She pointed at the open door. "Can you climb?" "I..." The unicorn looked at the shaft. Her ears twitched. She nodded. "Yeah, I think so." Wham! The icebox rattled. It definitely budged. "Follow me." Locke rattled a light gem into ignition, tossed it into the shaft, and climbed in. She slid down a few feet, then waited for the unicorn to follow. Her movements were shaky and nervous, but once she'd braced herself, the unicorn didn't fall. "It's not that hard," Locke whispered up. She dropped another few feet. "Just keep your..." Splinters. A crash. One of the doors had broken. The unicorn yelped and instinctively pulled her legs in, and fell. Before Locke knew what was happening, the full weight of the unicorn was on her. Her hooves slipped. Her head and body banged against the wall as she dropped down the shaft. She landed hard on the bottom, crushed between the unicorn and her bag. Where the unicorn's body and hooves didn't dig into her ribs, the loot in her bag did. Pain rolled up her legs, across her ribs, down her spine. She groaned. Oh, Celestia!" gasped the unicorn. "I'm so sorry. Ouch!" She twitched, and a hoof whistled past Locke's eye. A colorful array of expletives leapt into Locke's head. Why had she had to react just then? If she'd just stayed calm, everything would be fine. Her stuff would still be intact. They'd be out of the shaft by now, probably halfway to the exit. Locke prepared to tell the unicorn exactly what she felt. Be quiet. Making her feel worse is exactly what you don't need right now. Locke compromised by moaning. "Happens." She blinked a few times, trying to get the stars out of her eyes. It didn't really work. The light gems she'd dropped had been crushed beneath her, and they were cloaked in darkness. The unicorn rustled around, awkwardly trotting on Locke's limbs. "Sorry," she squeaked. "I'm trying to..." She groaned in pain. "Get off of you." Locke opened her mouth to respond. "Don't." Locke closed her mouth. She managed to pull in her legs and give the unicorn enough space to stand on solid ground, at least on 2 feet. Locke pushed herself up, and soon she was on 2 legs as well. Her head was still throbbing as she padded around to the walls. She found the door to the wine cellar and opened it. Still dark. She and the unicorn did an awkward sort of dance to twist around each other, and soon Locke was outside the shaft and had clicked the lights on. The unicorn climbed out of the dumbwaiter, her breathing finally slowing, and Locke wanted nothing more than to collapse on the floor, curl up into a ball, and sleep. She ached all over. Her heart was racing faster than it had ever been, and she could almost feel herself shutting down. "I think they went down the dumbwaiter! Some pony checked the cellar!" But that wasn't really an option. Locke peered inside the frame of the dumbwaiter door. Right next to the lock was a small gem winking at her. She glanced at the door. A similar gem glistened on the bolt. She recognized them as a way of making sure the dumbwaiter couldn't move if the door was open. Locke brought her hoof down, shattering the gem on the door. No one was riding the cart down anytime soon. She reached into her bag and cringed at the jewel dust in there. All of her light gems and the crystals from the ritual chamber had been shattered in the fall. She tentatively pulled out the largest chunk she could find. The tiny shard glowed fitfully. Locke tossed it aside in disgust. She rolled her twinging shoulder. She wasn't going to do much climbing after that fall. She doubted she could even climb up the shelves in here for a shortcut. The unicorn was panting, leaning against a shelf and shakily mumbling a constant stream of obscenities. Locke laid a hoof on her shoulder. "Almost there," she said. "Uh-huh," murmured the unicorn. "Sure." "Really? Over in that corner," Locke pointed. "There's an exit to the outside. We get there and run to the gate, screaming bloody murder." "Why didn't I unlock it first?" The unicorn's breathing slowed, and she ran a hoof through her mane. She took a deep breath and lifted her head. "Right," she said, her voice steadier. So, the door on the far side of the cellar banged open. "I know you're in here!" some pony yelled. "Down!" hissed Locke, as she and the unicorn both hit the floor. "Follow me." The two of them began crawling along the ground, toward the outside exit. "Look! You're not getting out of here! Make it easy for yourselves, and surrender!" They came to a shelf that intersected with the wall. Locke reluctantly turned inward, towards the rest of the cellar. After a too long aisle, a T-junction of shelves loomed before her. Locke tried to angle closer to the exit, but another shelf prevented her from just doing a 180 around the one that had blocked them in the first place. Were these ponies just so crazy they even needed to make the wine delivery mares feel helpless and dependent on them? Last chance! Just shout if you want to give yourselves up! A four-way intersection. Locke decided to go straight. Her spirits were rising. This wasn't so bad. Yet. And how fast could the pony search the cellar, anyway? It was just as much a maze for her as for the two of them. Fine. Have it your way. Whoomp. Locke twitched. Why'd she have to tempt fate? Hold on, she whispered to the unicorn. She peered through a gap between barrels. The door to the hallway had been shut. A bat pony, maybe even the same one she'd seen up above, was on the top of the steps, strapping into a repeating crossbow harness and fumbling with something on the wall. Then, every single light gem in the cellar winked out. I've been thinking about it. I thought of it in the last chapter, but I forgot to mention it. Why do they keep... like, that's a lot of clothes, considering most ponies don't wear a lot of clothes. Just struck me as a little odd. Well, moving forward, they're gonna play hide and seek with someone with a crossbow in the dark. Joy! I would like to point out that despite the name, a repeating crossbow is not a fully automatic weapon in its traditional design. Nor is it a semi-automatic weapon. It is actually a bolt, like... it works like you might think a pump-action shotgun. That's not quite how it works, but it's a similar level of... you fire, you move the lever back and forth, and then you can fire again. Much quicker than, say, a regular crossbow. For example, an average heavy crossbow, and some might be a little faster, but the heavier ones you can fire about twice a minute. A traditional repeating crossbow you can fire about once every 2 seconds, give or take. You know, might be a little slower than that, but yeah, twice a minute or 30 times a minute. Big difference. Also, repeating crossbows tended not to be very heavy. Like, okay, they're heavy, but not... they are not powerful weapons. They are not terribly accurate, although they're not terribly inaccurate. But they are short range, and they're not very heavy. But unfortunately, they have a tendency to be poisoned. So, this one, fair warning, just based on historical use, might be poisoned. Joy! Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you liked it, everyone. Tune in next time to see how they get out of this one. Good luck to them. Bye, everyone. Have a good time.